Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order, the Mayor and Board of Commissioners for December 27th, 2022. Can I get the roll call, please?
Commissioner Braun?
Here.
Mayor Marion?
Here.
Commissioner Warnick?
Here.
Commissioner Pearson?
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum.
Will you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you bow your heads with me for a brief prayer? Father God, I come to you tonight on behalf of our town. I ask that you watch over our citizens, Lord, and our elected body. Be with those who are in pain this year, Lord, with losses of family members, those that are alone, shut-ins. Please be with them. Please watch over our law enforcement and first responders, as well as our military that are here and overseas. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Town Administrator, do you have the consent agenda?
Yes, as a reminder, we started the consent agenda concept for things that are rather boilerplate. In this particular case, what you should have in front of you is the video summary of the last town meeting. And again, we do not do written meeting minutes because our meetings are videotaped and live streamed. But in order to make it easier for anyone wishing to revisit something that took place at a town meeting, we decided to create basically a summary, which basically is a reproduction of the agenda at the previous meeting with a timestamp of when the different subject matter on the agenda was addressed, and if there were any motions or actions taken, we are not giving on the video summary a word for word of what the motion was. We're just basically summarizing the end result of the motion. Anyone wishing to see what really would be the legal portion of the meeting would refer back to the video. So this is just sort of a cheat sheet for anybody in the future to see what's going on. And we just ask that the elected body ratify it in concept.
Can I get a motion to approve the 11/20/22 town meeting video summary?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving forward into public presentations. Town Administrator, our year-end review.
Yes, Mayor. You had asked me to sort of give an overview and a summary of what's occurred in the past year and where we are at on various projects and subject matters in town. And I've sort of broken it down into 5 individual categories. I think the one that is always pressing that I want to cover first is the financial status and the budget of the town. As you know, quite frankly, the town has done remarkably well through the leadership and guidance of not only this elected body that has been in position for many years now, but some previous elected bodies that have been able to provide services to the town residents without raising the taxes, and in 2 separate occasions has actually lowered the town real estate tax, again, without sacrificing services. And you could even say that we have found creative ways to actually provide more services to the town. For instance, the amazing community events that the mayor and staff put forward with the help of the elected body. Sunfest, Spooktacular, and Winterfest are wildly successful now, and they're great for the community. We've been able to fit those into the budget. We've been able to hire additional police officers over the years and replace police officers. We've been able to make the salaries of our police department competitive so that we can attract good police officers. Which is important for the security of our community. Economically, we have just about paved every street in the town of Rising Sun over the last 6 to 7 years. And when you think that a street should hypothetically last at a minimum of 10 years, we're well on our way to getting some sustainability and structure with our roads and staying ahead of those. So the one area that we are still working on financially is our infrastructure, our sewer and water rates. We all know the very difficult circumstances that the town was facing heading into the early 2000s with an outdated wastewater treatment plant and basically a failing or underperforming water system resulted in essentially $26 million of infrastructure financing that had to be secured just to stabilize the water and sewer capacity that was needed for the town. Unfortunately, that resulted in very high water and sewer rates that not only this board has been sensitive to, but past boards have been sensitive to also. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going through tonight, and I want to bring the residents up to speed, is the town's way of trying to create economic opportunities for the town to bring in new revenue, to bring in new users to the system in order to get more users on the system so that we can, at the very least, stabilize the rates, if not be in a position to lower the rates in the coming years. In summary, from a financial standpoint, the town of Rising Sun is a very attractive place for people to live. It really is, with the school systems being fantastic. The education is very good. The streets are in good shape. We have very low crime in our community. And you can see this desire to be in the community simply through the amount of inquiries we get from people to want to develop in the community and the amount of money that's being invested in rehabbing some of the properties in town. You don't have to go back that far, maybe 4 or 5 years, and we had a lot of vacancies in the town of Rising Sun. That has changed through the leadership of the elected body and the long game, if you will. It's not a short game that we're playing. It never has been. It's been a long game. And so here we are at the close of 2022, and we're starting to see the stability that has been built in order to continue with that long-range plan of basically putting the town of Rising Sun in a better position in which we found it for our residents. So the financial situation is really good. We don't generate a lot of real estate tax. I've said this before. When you look at it from a business, anyone who's ran a business knows you typically want to have anywhere from 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, depending upon what forecaster you talk to. You want to have months of reserve funds in hand to be able to offset any kind of emergencies. We are nowhere near that point. We balance our budget every year, as you know, with $5 to $20 some odd $1,000 surpluses. Projected surpluses. We try to anticipate everything that could occur in our annual budget, and in many cases, those items don't occur, but we've created essentially our own rainy day approach in the way we do our budget so that the money's there if we need it. So, you're seeing, if you reflect back to the last couple audit reports, you can see the positive numbers starting to build over the years. And that, again, is through taking a long look at needs that the community has, planning for them accordingly, and making sure that we prioritize things that are needed. So the next exciting thing, which the town is you know, anyone who remembers all the discussions back in the early or to mid 2000s was sewer and water was sucking the life out of the town of Rising Sun. You all remember back in 2015 when we did the report that showed that in 2010, the town brought in $936,000 of real estate tax on a much lower real estate tax rate. And it wasn't until this year that we are actually bringing in the same amount of real estate tax that we brought in 2010, but we have a slightly higher real estate tax rate. What I'm saying to you is that essentially when the town didn't have any water and sewer for development, the town basically started to dry up on the vine economically. There weren't a whole lot of people making investments in their property and their businesses. There were no new businesses wanting to come into the town of Rising Sun because there wasn't adequate sewer and water. So the whole linchpin to move the town forward was to solve these water and sewer issues. And we always said that solving the water and sewer issues would pave the way for an economic rebirth for the town. And that's what we're seeing. You go down Main Street alone and you look at Rise and Grind and you look at Bog Total and now Sue's Restaurant is in the process of being renovated. You look at the boutique that's on Main Street. You go back 4 years ago, and 4 or 5 years ago, and those places were vacant. You know, back then. They're now, not only are they occupied, but they all receive various first, second, and third place mentions in the most popular of Cecil County, meaning that Cecil County as a whole is coming to Rise and Grind. It's a very attractive business. Cecil County as a whole is spending money at the Bog Total. Cecil County as a whole is going to the boutique store and the other locations in the area. So you have firsthand evidence of this economic rebirth. And although it is on a small scale, in our scale, it means everything because we're not a large town. So every little bit makes a big difference in the town. So we're seeing the rebirth in our downtown area, but the town is also taking some steps to try to continue to jumpstart economic development in the community. As you recall, a couple months ago, we bought the old church, the church sitting at the corner of Walnut Street and Main. It was up for sale. We used some of our ARPA funds that we were given from the federal government for economic development, and we purchased the church. We've spent some money putting a new roof on it. We put some copper flashing on it. We want to get the building stabilized. It had a really bad leaking issue in there. It was getting water that was leaking down through the roof, and then water that was literally coming down the alley and getting into the staircases and into the building. So we're dealing with all of those items to get the building battened down. We've spent some money to redo the HVAC system in there so that we can keep the building at a reasonable temperature over the wintertime to slow down any decay that was occurring in the building. So we're getting that stabilized, all with the idea in the springtime that the elected body could put together a committee of some good people in the community and start thinking about what's going to happen in that building. Generally, the idea has been to turn it into a focal point of the community with the idea, and the way I've always described it is at any time during the year, whether it be a Thursday evening, a Saturday afternoon, whatever it may be, that we have the ability to dump 100 to 150 people out into the community to go to the Bog Total, go to Sue's Restaurant, which is, I believe, going to be opening under a new name of Hatches. Go to Rise and Grind. There's 200 seat capacity in the congregation in that church. With some modifications, we could build a stage in there that on a Saturday afternoon we can have a battle of the bands or street lamp productions. All the kids that are registered to learn about performing arts can have a really upscale, state-of-the-art stage to be able to put their plays on and to show everybody everything they've learned in the performing arts. So we can provide that kind of environment. Maybe we reintroduce the movie theater that used to be there on Main Street. Under Commissioner Warnick and Mayor Marion, a couple of years, we started the Movies in the Park idea, where the town would purchase the rights to basically B or second-tier movies, and we tried to do movies in the park, and we battled all the mosquitoes and the bugs down at Denny Richards Park, and then we thought about doing it at Veterans Park. Imagine us being able to have that congregation in there, and once a month, maybe there's a movie night in Rising Sun, and families can come out on a Saturday evening at 6 o'clock, watch a movie for an hour or two, and then go get something to eat at some of the different establishments. So that's what we're tentatively envisioning the church to be. The other property we've been trying to get our hands on is 16 Main Street. That has been a thorn in our side for probably a good 7 to 8 years. It's been an ongoing discussion with the county. The property has gone to tax sale. No one has purchased the property at tax sale because there's a very large tax bill due on the property. We have been trying to negotiate with the county to get possession of that building so that we can make sure things are done with it that are good for the community. Essentially, we want to see something go in there that plays off the other businesses in the town, that feed. It's sort of, I always talk about it being circular synergy, so to speak, a circular feed off one another. And so the elected body wants to take the initiative to get control of that property so that we can ensure the investment that is done in there is good for the whole of the town of Rising Sun. So we're working on that. That's a project the town attorney is working on to try to get us the legal steps needed to get possession of that property. For the elected body, we have completed the Main Street Visioning Project and Economic Vision. You guys have seen some of the draft videos in the past. I would like to think in January we could potentially unveil them for the community to see just how aggressive the town of Rising Sun and the elected body is trying to get in positioning our downtown area to be able to prosper. We want town residents to invest in these properties. We want people to invest in these properties and make them into something that continues to move the town of Rising Sun to the head of the pack. And so we basically developed a concept plan and a vision of what the downtown area could look like, how it could tie in to the Little League, the efforts that the Little League is trying to do, how it ties into the community events, what the downtown could look like. And I'm real excited to introduce those to the community because there's just a lot of energy comes out in these videos, and it's a great plan to start putting in place. As I mentioned, another rehab that's taking place is the Old Sue's Restaurant, which will open under the new name of Hatchers, which is Hatchers is going to be the same people that own and operate the Bog Turtle. They're looking to make it into a restaurant rental space for people to hold parties there. They are talking about renovating the second floor of it, but they're not going to at this particular time. And then there's even talk about potentially putting a third story on top of the building, which sort of ties into the visioning plan that we have for the town. So there's a lot of excitement brewing at Hatcher's or Sue's Restaurant. Another economic development opportunity is, if you recall, back, I guess in May, we changed some of the zoning in our comprehensive plan to turn Colonial Way into completely commercial zoning up in there. It had a little bit of R2 zoning up there that didn't really make sense with the library there and the medical facility and some of the light industrial that takes place on the back end of McNamee Lane. And then you have the pizza shop up there and some other businesses that have been in that little strip mall section. The idea was to turn it into commercial, and as luck would have it, it has been purchased by someone that I'm excited to know that they have purchased this property, because he has a good vision on what he wants to do up there. All of his developments in Chesapeake City, where he has a lot of property, he spends good money to make those businesses look really good. So we've got a diamond in the rough that's going to start to take shape in the next year or two up on Colonial Way. That will just be a great asset for the town. So there's a lot of stuff going on from an economic development standpoint. The next thing I wanted to touch upon is infrastructure and MS4. MS4 is that word that we're going to all soon hate to hear about. I know I'm already tired of hearing about it. And essentially what it is an unfunded mandate from the EPA down to the state that requires municipalities of our size to take a lot of responsibility for stormwater runoff. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have responsibility in that, but the problem is that prior to the responsibility being placed on the town, you could say there wasn't a lot of good oversight happening when some of these developments were taking place. Commissioner Pearson, you can relate to this. When your development was built, nobody told your folks in there that they had a homeowners association. And no one told that homeowners association that they were responsible for the stormwater management ponds. And so the developer that was developing that has now gone belly up and isn't even in operation anymore. And so now a very expensive repair is being left to the homeowners of that development. And we have the same thing happening in Commissioner Braun's development in Keppel's Mill, where there was not a very good effort to put a homeowners association together as required, and it's a fragmented homeowners association, and the responsibility of maintaining those ponds is left upon very few of the property owners. So it's a catch-22, because if those ponds are not maintained, the law has been changed where the entirety of the town of Rising Sun is now held responsible for that. So I want to segue back when we talk about what we all basically inherited coming out of the early 2000s was a lot of dysfunction in a variety of different ways. It led to sewer and water infrastructure issues that led to the town essentially drying up on the vine economically, that led to a lot of hard decisions that had to be made and raising sewer and water rates to try to get out of it. And so it all segues together into one thing. The good thing is that we have reached clearly the halfway point, if not more of the halfway point, where there's a lot of positive things that are in place and a lot of positive things that are going to continue to follow. But the MS4 reporting, if you remember 2 years ago, generally speaking, the state requirement basically says that by December of 2025, which is only 3 more years from now, the town will have to spend the equivalent of about $1.75 million in today's money to basically reduce our nutrient footprint by 20%, which is a good thing. In the state of Maryland, the economic engine is driven by the Chesapeake Bay. And there's a lot of stuff that comes down from New York and Pennsylvania through the Susquehanna. We all read the stories about what's behind the Conowingo Dam and all the impacts of that. All that stuff affects the fishing of Maryland, which is a major economic engine for the state. And so what they've said is everybody has to share in reducing that nutrient footprint. And I always like to talk, we're all familiar with the catch term of lower your carbon footprint. We've all heard that in the past. The MS4 requirement is basically the equivalent of that, only as a town, we have to lower our nutrient footprint by 20%. And we've already spent about $90,000 doing the evaluations that were needed and filling out the annual reports that we have to fill out, but we're staring down a $1.75 million expenditure by December of 2025, and quite frankly, we don't have a tax revenue stream in place to do that. Again, segueing back, when I talk about how we balance our budget on $5,000 to $15,000, $20,000 surpluses, that has to go towards that $1.75 million expenditure that we got to make in basically 3 years. So that's why the economic engine that we are creating in the investments in the town is so important, to get new investments in the town to generate that real estate tax and revenue to be able to pay for these things. It's unfortunate. Nobody likes it. It's definitely a valid initiative for the state to take. It's just really unfortunate that it's unfunded at this point. And so we have to come up with that revenue on our own. So you're going to continue to hear a lot about the MS4 reporting. Now, with all that bad news about the MS4, one of the things that the town got very creative about was the decommissioning of the lagoon. And Commissioner Pearson, I know this makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up when we talk about the lagoon and the wastewater treatment plant and what we went through over the years to get to where we're at. We all know that the lagoon has to be decommissioned. And fortunately, when we built the new wastewater treatment plant, MDE did not require us to decommission that lagoon at that point in time. And so I'm talking around 2016, where it was estimated that the cost of decommissioning that lagoon in total would be about $3 million to $4 million. Again, where's the money coming from? So it was an estimated cost of $3 to $4 million, and that consisted of getting all the accumulation of bad stuff out of the lagoon, getting it restored back to an environmentally friendly piece of 10.5 acres of ground, because that's how big the lagoon is. But we offload our sludge from the wastewater treatment process into the lagoon. We're permitted to do that. So when we decommission the lagoon, we no longer have the ability to offload that sludge, which means now we have to treat the sludge. And that cost was going to be about $1.5 million to get a sludge belt filter press, basically to process the sludge to be able to haul it out to be land applied someplace else. So we're looking at basically $1.5 to $2 million to decommission the lagoon, $1.5 to $2 million to do something with the sludge, for the estimated cost of $3 to $4 million to do something with the lagoon. But in our research a couple of months ago, we realized that the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, through the federal government, has some grant opportunities that are, the acronym is BRIC. And if you remember back in September of 2021, our wastewater treatment plant overflowed because of the amount of rainwater that fell during Tropical Storm Ida. And we were on top of it. There were a couple of us out there digging trenches to get the water away from the lagoon. But that put us in a position to be able to go to the Department of Emergency Management and say, hey, this is a bad situation to have this lagoon sitting here with the potential of it overflowing. And that agency said, you know what, you're right, we've got a pot of money that you can apply for. And so when you remember the MS4 requirement, we can satisfy that $1.75 million that it's going to take to comply with MS4. We can satisfy the $4 million to decommission the lagoon and to do something with the sludge by successfully getting a grant from the federal government to pay to decommission the lagoon. It will count towards the MS4 requirement, and we would really be in good shape. Our grant application is progressing through the multiple layers of the bureaucracy, and it's actually in front of the state clearinghouse. That's how far it's moved through the process. So we're excited about the blessing in disguise, so to speak, of the amount of money that could come in for that. So the next item, Southern States. If you remember, we annexed the main property of Southern States in the town back in September, I believe it was. They are now, that main property is now officially annexed into the town. We are working on finalizing the agreement between the town and Southern States. The biggest thing that's in flux is the fluctuating construction costs and the price for piping and material. So we're trying to iron all that out to pick the ideal time to start the construction of that water line. The other project is the Mount Street Broadband and Water Line Extension. If you remember, back in December of 2021, we received a grant from the Rural Maryland Council to be able to put a broadband. Actually, the grant was for the purpose of putting, upsizing some old 4-inch water lines and putting some 8 to 12-inch water lines in. And our grant was awarded because we also said we would put broadband in to get broadband conduit out to Route 1. The grant was approved, but unfortunately, the cost of construction took what was expected to be about a $1.3 million project and turned it into a $3.7 million project. So that project is on hold, and the Maryland Rural Council, along with the town of Rising Sun, were waiting for some stabilization in the construction world to put that project out to bid again. And we're talking about piggybacking it on the Southern States project so that we can get an economy of scale on a much larger water line project. We could save in the mobilization costs of doing the Mount Street project at the same time. I already mentioned street repaving. The one caveat I would add to that is we were able to do some temporary repairs on Pearl Street by the middle school. We had to delay the original plan of repaving Pearl Street because that's the location of where the water line and the broadband was going to be going in. And so we didn't want to spend all that money on putting the infrastructure in and, repaving the street. We originally had like $500,000 set aside to repave Pearl Street. But if we would have paved it when we originally wanted to, we would have been digging it up to put the water and broadband in, and essentially would have been throwing good money after bad. Dollar General in Sunoco. This is another infrastructure project where the Dollar General and Sunoco are going to be connecting to our water lines out there. Right now, Sunoco is getting sewer from us, but they're not getting water. They're going to be connecting to the water line. And Dollar General, as part of their original annexation back in 2017, is going to be connecting to the water and sewer. If you remember, that was an annexation that they wanted to get off the well and septic out there in order to build at least 2 more commercial pads out there. So we're in discussions with those folks for that. The other item is, you remember, over the years, we have talked about all the water quality issues that are in and around the town of Rising Sun. Cecil County's Master Sewer and Water Plan mentions those water and sewer issues. Their comprehensive plan mentions those sewer and water issues, and MDE has been approaching us about paying to extend infrastructure into those areas to solve those water quality issues that are in and around the town. So those are ongoing discussions that we're having with MDE. Again, this ties back to our sewer and water rates and the infrastructure. It provides flexibility for the town going forward. Property maintenance. Our rental inspection program is set to take off on January 3rd. We've gone through various advertisements with our landlords about the need to register their properties, which would be followed up by an inspection program in the future. We're set to kick that off on January 3rd. It's probably going to take us probably at least 6 months or more to get all the properties registered and inspected. I think it's important to say, for all the landlords out there, we're not really interested in the aesthetics of your property as much as on the inside, the life safety issues. We want to make sure that outlets are working, they're not sparking, they're not falling out of the wall, that GFI outlets are where they're supposed to be, smoke detectors work. We're not worried about the age of the carpet, the paint on the walls, or something like that. I think it's also important to let landlords know that we recognize that the tenant has a responsibility in this too. And so the tenants are going to be held to a standard of the way they upkeep their interior. We don't want conditions where people are not maintaining it. And believe it or not, and I've showed the Board of Commissioners over the past couple months some of the deplorable conditions in some of our rental properties that lead to foul smells, that lead to cockroaches and infestations out in other areas. So we want to get ahead of that, and the tenants are going to be held equally responsible for the way they maintain their properties as well. This isn't all just on the landlords. In the past, I have showed you guys property maintenance. Again, I'm picking on Commissioner Pearson, but he and I go back a long way. And I used to always say that property maintenance is in the eye of the beholder. What is good in one community might not be acceptable in another community, and that property maintenance is like a cobblestone path in a garden. We haven't all stepped on the path, on all the cobblestones, but eventually we will. When I first came to Rising Sun, cars up on cinder blocks was really not considered that big a deal. Now we get voluminous complaints from residents about the conditions of properties around them, and the elected body has had pressure put on them about that. People don't want to live in those kinds of environments anymore. And I've showed you pictures of mold and ungodly mold-infested rental situations. Unfortunately, you wouldn't really think it would be, but it's in more of our managed apartment complexes and not necessarily our individual landlords that are creating the issue. It's some of our apartment complexes that their maintenance people are just not maintaining these properties. So there's a lot of issues out there that we are slowly addressing. We hired a code enforcement officer in the past year. He started in February. We're starting to get a lot of compliance on high grass. We'll be very proactive on snow. As we get into the wintertime months, we are trying to address the concerns that our residents are telling us about, their concerns about the way properties are being kept, and life safety issues on sidewalks, grass getting too high, creating harborage for rats and snakes. We get a lot of pictures sent to us of snakes in people's yards where they're not cutting the grass. So there is an issue, and we're trying to respond to that. Under the land development world, as I talked about in economic development, we have a lot of land development that is brewing and taking shape. We've been updating the board as we go along. One of them is Stevens Preserve, the other one is Maple Heights, and the third one is the Knutson property. Despite the economic downturn that we are in, and I know I recently attended a training conference put on by Legit, our insurance carrier, who does educational seminars once a year, and they had a very well-known economist there who was saying that the biggest difference between this economic downturn and the one of 2008 is that the trend lines in residential home construction have not dropped off like they did in 2008, that there's still a demand in the construction industry, and the construction industry is what drives our economy. And so although there are other areas in the economy that are floundering and maybe slowly making a recovery, the downturn is not considered to be as significant, at least in the residential home building. I bring that up because these three developments that I spoke about are still signing agreements with the landowners to move forward. Their internal people are telling them that there is still a market in the town of Rising Sun for residential home building. So I tell you that because when I came to the town of Rising Sun, I heard all the horror stories back in 2007 of all the bad development that took place and how the town was taken advantage of. I want to assure people that the staff and the planning commission and our consultants are all doing our due diligence to make sure that these developers have the ability to develop their land the way they should be able to develop it, but not at the detriment of the residents of the town of Rising Sun. We are standing strong on trying to minimize traffic issues in this community and multiple ways in and out of communities for the benefit of our fire department. We are holding the line on some of these code requirements that are common in other communities, but for a variety of reasons were not followed back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And we see the end result of that, of some of our developments where on a Saturday afternoon, 2 cars can't pass when they go down the street. Or if somebody's having a July 4th party, it could be very difficult for the fire department to get a truck down that street. We are holding the line. I'm here to tell you that some of those old-time developers are not happy, and they're letting us know that they are not happy. And they're making, they're threatening to take some initiatives to try to get the town to do what it used to do. We're not budging. And I want to assure you that we have the residents of our town at the forefront of making sure that people are able to develop their land as they should be able to by right, but it's done in a manner that is not detrimental to our residents. And so that, if there's any questions from the board, that basically concludes the categories I wanted to cover and where we're at going forward.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Moving into citizens' input, just a reminder, citizens' input, you just need to address your name as well as your address, and if you are, if you're a town resident or not. Would anyone like to speak this evening?
Yeah, we can go up. You go up to the podium.
Hello, my name's TJ Johnson, and I have property on Pierce Road, right next to the Knutson's farm where he was speaking of. It's presently in the county. I didn't annex in, and it is zoned for 5 building lots. And I would like to do a non-annexation, but actually do a tie-in to the water and the sewer. And that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. I think that our town administrator can work with you on the optics of planning and zoning and what would go into doing that. Absolutely. Would anyone else like to speak this evening? All right. Moving forward into staff reports. Town administrator, you already did yours, right?
Yep, I'm good.
All right. Chief?
I'll be brief.
Oh, come on.
Thank you.
There's a caveat that goes with this. The next meeting will be my end of the year report, so be prepared for that one. It may not be as long, but it'll be there. The status of the vehicles that were ordered is still, they have not populated a VIN number at this point. It's been about 6 months. But if you recall, the last time we ordered vehicles, it was almost, 18 months before we saw anything from them. So I've got nothing so far with that. I spoke about grants the last time. 2 of them have been submitted. One was in conjunction with the county, the sheriff's office, and the other law enforcement agencies in the county. And that one looks very promising for all of us to get some technology in the county that we did not have, currently don't have much of. And hopefully that should be awarded before the end of January. Also, the State Aid for Police Protection Grant was submitted, and we should be hearing back from that. I think that typically comes later in the year, sometime around June or July. And that concludes my report for now.
Thank you. Town Attorney, do you have a report?
I do. I just wanted to let you know that we are in ongoing negotiations with the Mill Creek Trailer Park. As you know, there has been issues for over the past year due to the flooding, and we tried to work with the owner. I'm not sure that we're going to reach a satisfactory accord, so the matter may take a litigation stance in the near future. But we're on that, so when you hear about that, we'll certainly have a closed session where we can brief you on what the issues are and the impacts to the town. And that's the crux of my report.
All right, thank you, Town Attorney. Moving forward into Mayor's report. My report's pretty brief. What a year for the town of Rising Sun. We have had enormous attendance at our community events, which I think is amazing for our community. We continue to welcome new businesses, which we will do in the near future with Hatchers on Main coming to Main Street. We bought a church, and I can't wait to see what happens with it. I can't wait to see what we do for our community in 2023. It's been an honor to work with you guys, and I look forward to working with you into the future. Commissioner Braun,
I have no report.
Commissioner Pearson,
No report.
Commissioner Warnick.
I just have 300 pages. No, I'm kidding. I have no report.
All right. Moving forward, upcoming town meetings. We have a town meeting scheduled for January the 10th. There's also upcoming holidays, which are listed on the agenda, as well as trash, recycling, and yard waste schedule. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Hold 1 second. Could we just clarify once again the trash pickup for this week and next week?
Yes,
you.
it's this Friday.
It's this Friday, but the New Year's week.
It's still listed as Friday.
It's still listed as
Because
Friday?
the holidays are falling on the Sunday.
Okay, because I believe at the last meeting, the one for next week was going to be Saturday.
No, we'll put it out on Facebook if it's a change, but we
Okay,
were
but
looking
we're
at the
still looking
calendar.
at Friday and Friday.
Yeah, Friday and Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have.
Speaking of that, I did notice that one of the neighboring municipalities has an actual waste management schedule, which changes, which they get for the year, which shows the change of dates. Can we look to see if we could potentially get something like that?
We do, we put it on our, that's what we put on our website and we put it on Facebook.
Did we send it out in our water billing system?
We sent it out several times.
Yes.
All right, well then I guess that's all we can do.
We haven't tried smoke signals yet.
Okay. Okay, maybe Commissioner Pearson could hand deliver them to every
Yeah,
resident.
there you go.
Standing there.
All right, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.